Why are the biggest American flags always at car dealerships? Like, are they selling cars or starting a revolution? Why do strangers say, "How are you?" but walk away before you can answer? Why does every food come with ranch? And why is it kind of amazing? Why is it tipping a moral test every time you leave the house? Hola chicos, welcome back to my channel. I'm super excited to make this video because even after living in the US for quite a few years now, I still experience culture shocks. As a Spaniard, there are just some things that continue to surprise me, confuse me, or make me laugh every time. Like, why are Americans so obsessed with ice in their drinks? Or why is small talk basically a sport here? So today I'm sharing some of the biggest and funniest culture shocks I've had and still have while living in the US. And I'm going to classify them into groups: people, restaurants, houses, cars, grocery stores, healthcare, parenting, and random. But before I dive into it, don't forget to like this video, thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. Alright, first things first, you might be thinking, what is a culture shock? What are you talking about, Anna? Great question. So, what is a culture shock? Imagine landing in a new country and suddenly feeling like you have stepped into a parallel universe. Everything looks kind of familiar, but also totally weird and different. That is a culture shock. It's that what is happening right now feeling you get when you realize that people greet each other differently. Like, do we have, shake hands, nod, do a weird smile?
What the hell is going on?
There are unspoken rules that no one tells you about, like tipping in the US, which feels less like a kind gesture sometimes and more like solving a math problem under pressure. Or food habits that could be wild, like people here eat dinner at 5 p.m., put ice in their white wine sometimes, and microwave things that you didn't even know that could be microwaved. So it usually happens when you move to a new country or even just visit. And a culture shock can be funny, awkward, or straight up confusing, but it's all part of adjusting and learning about another culture, and hey, it gives you great stories to tell. Alright, my first group is people. And okay, I feel like Americans can sometimes be portrayed as mean or rude in social media and news, especially from an outsider perspective, but here's the thing, it's often more about misunderstandings and stereotypes than actual meanness, and I feel like this is because of social media. Social media loves drama. The loudest, rudest moments go viral, like, airport meltdowns, Karens, and people yelling at each other in public, but it's not representative of most people, but those clips get views. I feel like Americans tend to be more direct and overly enthusiastic sometimes, and in some cultures that comes as aggressive. On the flip side, when Americans are not overly friendly, they might seem cold or distant to people from high context or warm cultures like Spain. Now, if you're seeing through the lens of, politics, crimes, stories, or angry debates, yeah, they can look like, Americans are always yelling, but this is the highlight reel of the worst stuff. In reality, a lot of people who visit or move to the US are surprised by how friendly and helpful Americans can be, especially in smaller towns. It is just a different style of interactions. So once I moved here, I realized that most Americans are actually super friendly, super nice, over the top friendly sometimes. I've had strangers, smile at me for no reason, which confused me at first. People holding doors, from miles away, to the point that I had to run to the door because I felt bad that they were holding the door for me for so long. And I lived in 3 different states, mainly in the Midwest, and oh my gosh, Midwesterners are so nice. But that brings me to another thing, how massive the US is. This country is basically a continent, and with that sign comes different regional accents, and it's funny because sometimes in social media makes fun of my accent, like, wow, you sound so foreign, and I'm not sitting here like, bro, have you heard someone from Alabama talk? Like, that's a different language from someone in Boston, okay? Someone has an accent here in the US. Alright, my next group is restaurants. So when it comes to dining out, the US definitely has its own vibe. The tipping culture here was one of my first shocks. Back in Spain, tips are small, not expected, but appreciated. But in the US, it's a whole system where you are expected to tip at least 15 to 20% of the total, if not more. And if you don't, it feels like you're being judged or rude. But here's the reason behind it. In the US, waiters are often paid minimum wage by their employers, which can be as low as $3 an hour in some places. The rest of the income comes from tips. So society knows this and tips generously to help make up for the low base pay. It's a system that relies on customers to ensure servers are properly compensated for their hard work. So if you're traveling to the US, just make sure that you learn about the culture and tip well, because the waiters are working incredibly hard to serve you and they definitely deserve to be tipped. It's a huge part of their income, and tipping is a great way to show appreciation for their hard work. Another thing I've noticed is how quickly they want you to eat and get the check. You order, eat, and before you know it, the check is already on the table. Like they are in a rush to turn over the table. But here's the catch: you are also encouraged to take your time and enjoy the meal, just not too much time, because they will bring you the check whether you're ready or not. Like, it happens so many times that I'm eating dessert and you're still eating and they bring you the check and they say, but no rush, and I'm like, but you're rushing me by bringing it to me. As for the food, I was shocked by the portion sizes. I mean, everything is huge. One plate can easily fit 2 people in Spain. I personally love it. Like, give me all the leftovers. I don't want to cook the next day. But then we have the soda machine with free refills. I've never seen anything like it in Spain. You get 1 drink and that's it. But here, you can drink as much soda as you want, and don't get me started on free water with tons of ice. I was so surprised when I was handed a glass of ice water without even asking for it. It was on ice. I love it, and I wish that Spain did that as well. Timing is also a big difference too. Dinner in Spain is late, usually around 9 or 10 p.m. But here people eat early, like 6 or 7 p.m. Even kids eat earlier, and in bars and clubs close around 2 a.m. unless you're in like New York City, Vegas, or Miami. In Spain, we're more into the club culture instead of a bar, and it's totally normal to party until 6 or 7 a.m. So that was definitely a big of a shock to my nightlife system. And lastly, fast food. In the US, fast food is everywhere, but it's so good. I'm not gonna lie. The variety of sauces, it's mind-blowing. There's always a new dipping sauce to try. And I couldn't get over how many options there are for a simple burger or fries. It's like a whole world of convenience and flavors I didn't know I needed. Okay, and this is just a fun fact about me. My favorite fast food here in the US, I would say, is Chick-fil-A. As for the sandwiches, I love a good spicy chicken sandwich. Absolutely love it. And for the salad, I love the Cobb salads. And what I do is I mix 2 sauces or dressings, I guess. The avocado lime dressing and the buffalo zesty sauce. Oh my gosh, it is so good. You put everything together, mix the salad. Amazing. Right, my next group is parenting in general. I'm gonna talk first about breastfeeding. One thing that definitely threw me off when I first arrived to the US is the breastfeeding culture. In Spain, breastfeeding is pretty natural and done pretty openly. No one bats an eye. But here in the US, I quickly noticed that a lot of moms use these huge covers when they breastfeed in public, which I found a bit surprising because I've never seen one before. It's like there's this pressure of making breastfeeding more discreet, as if something that should be hidden. And I get it, don't get me wrong, everyone has different comfort levels, so you do whatever you want to do. But I just felt so different from what I was used to in Spain, where mothers feel totally free to breastfeed anywhere. It made me wonder if people here are more uncomfortable with the idea here, even though it's such a natural and beautiful thing, in my opinion. My next point is maternity leave and parental leave in general. In Spain, parental leave is a big deal. New parents are given several months of paid leave to bond with their babies and adjust to family life, and it's pretty common for both mothers and fathers to take time off. But here in the US, I was shocked to find that there's no federal law that requires paid maternity or paternity leave. Many people only get a few weeks off, if that, and it's often unpaid or barely compensated. That was mind-blowing to me. In Spain, it's considered essential for new parents to take time to be with their kids, but in the US, it feels like people are expected to return to work almost immediately. It made me realize how different the approach of work-life balance can be here. Another difference I noticed in parenting is little social life. Let me explain. In Spain, parents often hang out during the week, and it's common to see them on the playground chatting with other parents and having a casual beer while the kids run around on a random Tuesday. It's just, part of the laid-back culture, but in the US it feels like social life is reserved for the weekend, especially for parents. Weekdays are for work and taking care of the kids, but weekends, that's when people go out and get together. It's like there's an unspoken rule that weekday relaxation or socialization just doesn't happen. And I remember feeling surprised when I realized that most parents don't have midweek hangouts or spontaneous social moments, and it made me miss that sense of community and connection that we have in Spain. All right, my next section is houses. One of the biggest culture shocks for me when I moved to the US was how much space people have. Coming from Spain, when apartments are usually smaller and space is more limited, I was blown away by the size of American homes. Not only do most people have backyards, which is pretty much a luxury in Spain, but the appliances are huge. The fridges here are massive, and the washers and dryers are so big they look like they could fit an entire family inside. Back home, I was used to compact spaces and smaller appliances, but here everything is bigger, especially in the suburbs. Having all that space and all those giant appliances felt so luxurious and strange at first, but I quickly got used to it. And now I wonder how I ever survived in a tiny apartment with a tiny fridge. Another thing that blew my mind when I first arrived in the US was the garbage disposal. I know it sounds so silly, but in Spain we don't have them. So I had to manually dispose of food scraps. It always seemed like such a hassle, but here I looked into a kitchen and saw this mysterious device under the sink. Turns out it's for grinding up food waste and sending it down the drain. I was honestly fascinated, like I had no idea such a thing even existed. At first I was a little bit nervous about using it. I didn't know if I was gonna clog the pipes or destroy the kitchen or even cut one of my fingers. But oh my gosh, it makes life so much easier. I love it so much. It's one of those small things that makes you realize how different everyday life can be between countries. In my next sections is cars. When it comes to cars and driving, the US has some pretty wild differences compared to Spain. Let's talk drive-thrus first. In Spain, we're used to sitting at a cafe for a coffee, but in the US you can literally get a burger, a coffee, or even a prescription without even leaving your car, which is amazing. And then there are the massive cars. I have never seen so many trucks and SUVs in my life, but now I cannot live without them. I have a GMC Yukon and I love it. I love the space, the TVs, I love everything about it. But it's so funny because when my mom came to the US to visit and saw how many trucks people have, she was like, there are so many farmers here. And I was like, how do you know they are farmers? And she was like, I keep seeing these trucks. And I'm like, no mom, they are not farmers, they just love trucks. They love big trucks, they love big cars. And another thing that threw me off was the cables on the air instead of underground like in Spain. I kept thinking there was like a weird construction project or something, but no, that's how it's done here. And I will never forget also the first time I saw someone driving on red. So coming from Spain where you have to, stop and wait for that red light, I was like, can you just go on a red light? It blew my mind. And finally, the amount of lanes on the road, oh my gosh. In Spain, you usually find like a 2-lane road, but here sometimes you can find like 4, 5, 6 lanes, on the highway, which is bananas. My next section is grocery stores. Grocery stores in the US was another eye-opener for me. First of all, the price tags. In Spain, the price you see is the price you pay. But in the US, I was shocked to see that tax is not included on the price display. I would walk, up to the counter ready to pay, and then you find out that there's some extra charge that I did not expect. It feels like a mini math test, every time you go shopping. Then I noticed the cigarettes. It blew my mind that they are sold in the store front and center, often near the checkout. Back in Spain, they are sold at bars and cigarette stores called estancos. But the most overwhelming thing for me was the sheer amount of options. There are so much variety on everything. In Spain, we have a few brands of milk or bread, but here I could literally spend 10 minutes just trying to pick a loaf of bread because there are a million different kinds: whole, wheat, sourdough, gluten-free, organic, artisanal, you name it. And same goes for chips, soda. I was standing there looking the other day and there's just an entire island just dedicated to nothing but chips. And I was thinking, how do you even choose? It is exciting but also overwhelming, if that makes sense. My next section is healthcare. Healthcare was and still is a major culture shock for me. Coming from Spain, where we have public healthcare and no copays, I was used to getting medical care without worrying about the costs. You go to the doctor, then you don't have to pay anything up front, everything is covered. But in the US, it's a whole different ballgame. Healthcare here is expensive and it's mostly private, so you have a lot of copays for pretty much every visit. And don't get me even started on all the letters in the mail. Every time I go to the doctor, I get so much paperwork with, confusing terms like deductible, out-of-pocket maximum, in network that I have to, decode. I remember feeling just completely lost when I got my first bill, trying to figure out what the heck was covered, what wasn't. It was a real eye-opener for me, and it made me appreciate the simplicity of this Spain system, where everything is taken care of without the chaos and insurance forms or unexpected charges. That said, I want to say that I'm grateful for the care that I've received here in the US. The doctors that I've seen so far have been amazing, very attentive, and willing to take, the time to explain things to me. So despite of the confusion around the cost and everything, I have felt very well taken care of here, and I appreciate, American doctors. My next section is random. I didn't know how to classify these things, so that's why I made this section. Let's start with small talk. Americans love small talk. It's practically a national sport here, and you're gonna hear it pretty much everywhere. For example, in the elevator, people will be like, "Nice weather today, huh?" Or at the checkout counter, when you're at the grocery store, they'll be like, "Got any fun weekend plans?" Or even with your neighbor that you have never officially met, there'll be something like, "Hey, look what you've done with your lawn. I love it. Great job. Where did you get the lawnmower?" type of thing. It might seem superficial at first, especially if you're from a culture like Spain, where people can get deep really quick. But small talk in the US is actually a way to show friendliness and just give some social comfort. It's like a warm-up before having a real conversation. And oh my gosh, I remember the first I experienced small talk, I was so confused. I was at a grocery store minding, my own business, and the cashier looks at me and goes, "How's your day going?" And I start actually telling her my day. "Well, I've been having, a long day, da-da-dee, And she was, already scanning my eggs, like looking at me like, "That's great." That's when I realized that she didn't want to really know how my day goes. It was just, just saying hi with some extra words. That I learned that when someone says that, you just say, "Good, how about you?" Even if your life is falling apart, okay? Like they don't really want to know the answer. Okay, another thing that struck me right away in the US was the ads for medication everywhere. In Spain, we rarely see drug ads, but here in the US, you cannot escape them. They are on TV, online, even on billboards. It was so surreal seeing ads for things like antidepressants or pain relievers. And they also say the side effects on the same breath, which I was like, wow. Another thing is the flags. I see flags everywhere, and the sheer number of flags flying around is impressive. And personally, I don't mind it, and sometimes I even wish that Spanish people were more patriotic and more proud of showing the Spanish flag. And finally, the size of the country. As I mentioned, the US is huge, it is massive. In Spain, traveling between cities takes a few hours, but here you're crossing state lines every time you drive a few hundred miles. I have done a few road trips, and even though I was prepared for the distances, I didn't fully realize just how vast the US really is. Every state feels like a whole different country, and driving through them is like a mini vacation each time. Also, I feel like the US is so underrated when it comes to traveling. It has stunning national parks and iconic places like Niagara Falls. So if you like hiking, I cannot recommend the US enough. You should definitely come. And that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoy hearing about my culture shocks as a Spaniard living in the US. And just a reminder that every country is different and no place is perfect. I really appreciate being here in the US. It's such a wonderful place to be as an entrepreneur, to truly believe in yourself, and to explore all the amazing landmarks. The people are incredibly kind, and I'm just so grateful that I have the opportunity to experience, the American culture firsthand. So let me know in the comments if you relate to any of these culture shocks, or if you have, your own wild culture shock moments. I would love to hear that. And thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, and I will see you on the next video. Adios.